The sun beat down mercilessly over the red sands of Arizona Territory, 1886. The air shimmered like glass above the desert floor. Cowboy Daniel Reeves guided his horse, Dusty, along the riverbank, one of the few places left with running water this late in the summer. His canteen was nearly empty, his shirt clung to his back, and the cicadas screamed through the still air. He came out here often, to think, to escape the noise of the town and the ghosts of a past he didn't talk about. But today, something was different. The steady hum of the desert broke, replaced by a sharp, panicked cry. At first, he thought it was an animal. Then he heard it again, a voice. A woman's voice. Help! Without hesitation, Daniel kicked his boots into the stirrups and rode hard toward the sound. The horse pounded through the dust and reeds until he saw her, a young Apache woman struggling against the river's strong current. Her arms flailed wildly as the muddy water pulled her under again and again. "Hold on," he shouted, diving off his horse and running into the water. The river was colder than he expected, biting into his skin. He swam hard, his strong arms slicing through the current until his fingers brushed against her arm. She was barely conscious, her lips blue, eyes half open. He grabbed her and pulled with everything he had, fighting the pull of the river until his boots hit solid ground again. Both of them collapsed onto the sandy bank, gasping for air. The woman coughed up water, trembling from shock. Daniel took off his duster coat and wrapped it around her. "You're safe now," he murmured. She looked at him, her dark eyes wide and filled with fear. Her long black hair clung to her face, tangled with river grass. She tried to speak, but her words came out in broken English. "Why, help me." Daniel hesitated. Didn't seem right to let someone drown. She studied him quietly, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Then her eyes fluttered closed, and she fainted. Daniel lifted her carefully, feeling how light she was, half-starved, exhausted. He carried her to his horse and gently set her in the saddle. "You'll be all right, miss," he said softly, though he wasn't sure himself. By the time he reached his ranch, the sun was setting behind the mesas. He laid her down in the small wooden cabin he used for supplies, covering her with a blanket. He lit a lamp and sat nearby, watching her breathe, steady now, calm. He didn't know who she was or what danger she had been running from. But one thing was certain, that river hadn't just pulled her from death. It had brought her into his life for a reason. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, and Daniel Reeves, a cowboy who had never believed in fate, suddenly wasn't so sure anymore. By the next morning, the storm had passed and the Arizona sun blazed again, drying the land as if nothing had happened. The young Apache woman still slept, her breathing soft and steady. Daniel sat outside the small cabin, whittling a stick, glancing at the door every few minutes. When she finally woke, confusion filled her eyes. She looked around the small wooden room, the rough-hewn walls, the smell of horses, the faint sound of wind chimes hanging by the porch. Daniel walked in quietly, carrying a tin cup of water. "Easy now," he said. "You're safe. You near drowned out there." She took the cup with trembling hands, drinking slowly. "You save me," she said, her English broken but clear enough. Daniel nodded. "Name's Daniel Reeves." She hesitated. "Naya," she whispered, tapping her chest. "My name Naya. Glad to meet you, Naya," he said kindly. "You got anyone I can send word to? Your people?" Her eyes darkened with worry. "My tribe, they will come." Before Daniel could ask more, a sharp sound cut through the desert stillness, the rhythmic beat of horses approaching. He stepped out onto the porch and froze. A group of Apache riders was coming fast, dust trailing behind them. Within minutes, they surrounded the cabin. Their chief, a tall man with gray feathers braided into his hair, dismounted and stared coldly at Daniel. "White man," he said in accented English, "you took her." Daniel raised his hands calmly. "She was drowning. I pulled her from the river, that's all." The chief turned to Naya, who stood at the doorway, her eyes downcast. He spoke in Apache, and she answered quietly. Then, to Daniel's surprise, the chief nodded slowly and said, "You saved her life. Under our sacred law, she now belongs to you." Daniel blinked. "Belongs to me? That's not what I—" The chief interrupted, his tone solemn. "Our ways are not yours. The river spirits choose who lives and who dies. You changed her path, and now your paths are one." Daniel glanced at Naya. She didn't look angry, only resigned, almost sad. "Is that what you want?" he asked her softly. She didn't meet his eyes. "It is law," she murmured. Daniel clenched his jaw. "I didn't save you to own you," he said firmly, but the tribe members only exchanged knowing looks. The chief placed a hand on his shoulder. "You cannot fight what the spirits decide." Then he turned to his people and gestured. One by one, they rode away, leaving a stunned cowboy and a silent young woman standing in the desert dust. As their figures disappeared beyond the canyon, Daniel finally spoke. "Guess we're both stuck in something we didn't plan for." Naya looked at him, eyes glistening in the harsh sunlight. "Maybe," she said softly, "the river planned it." For the first time in years, Daniel felt something stir in his chest. Not fear, not confusion, but the faint echo of destiny. The days that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. Daniel Reeves wasn't used to sharing his space with anyone, much less an Apache woman the world said belonged to him. Yet each morning when he stepped outside, she was already awake, feeding his horses or sweeping the porch. Naya worked with silent grace, as if she'd always lived on the land. She never complained, never asked for anything. Sometimes Daniel would catch her humming strange, beautiful tunes, songs of her people, filled with both sorrow and hope. He tried to keep his distance, but the ranch was small, and fate had other plans. One afternoon, he found her by the corral, gently tending to a wounded colt. "He kick you yet?" Daniel asked with a half-smile. Naya looked up, brushing hair from her face. "No." He scared, not mean. She touched the horse's muzzle softly. "Same as people." Daniel paused, watching her hands, small, steady, kind. There was wisdom in her simplicity. "You talk like someone who's seen too much," he said. She gave a faint smile. "My tribe taught me, life and pain are brothers. We live with both." He nodded, silently understanding. Days turned into weeks. They began to talk more, share meals by the fire. Daniel taught her small words in English, and she taught him Apache names for stars and birds. She laughed for the first time one evening when he mispronounced a word so badly that even the horses seemed to look at him funny. It was the kind of laughter he hadn't heard in years, light, real, and alive. But the outside world wasn't so kind. One morning, Daniel rode into town for supplies. As soon as he walked into the saloon, the chatter fell silent. A man at the bar leaned over and said, "Heard you got yourself an Apache woman livin' out there." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She's not mine." The man smirked. "Law says she is. Her people's law, ain't it? Guess congratulations are in order, cowboy." Laughter rippled through the room. Daniel slammed his fist on the counter. "You don't talk about her that way." The room went still. Then, quietly, he paid for his supplies and left. Back at the ranch, Naya noticed his silence. "They spoke of me," she said softly that evening. He looked up, surprised. "How do you know?" "Your eyes," she said, "tell more truth than your mouth." He chuckled weakly. "You see right through me, don't you?" She smiled, her gaze meeting his. "Maybe River gave me eyes to see you." The night fell warm and still, and for the first time since he'd pulled her from the water, Daniel realized something he hadn't dared to admit: the bond between them wasn't law or duty. It was something real, something growing. And as the stars burned over the wide western sky, he knew one thing for sure: this woman who came from another world had somehow become the center of his own. Autumn crept slowly across the Arizona plains. The desert cooled, the wind turned sharp, and the long summer felt like a distant dream. Naya and Daniel had settled into a quiet rhythm, working side by side, sharing laughter, and slowly mending the broken parts of each other's hearts. But peace never lasts long in the West. One afternoon, Daniel spotted riders on the ridge, 6 Apache warriors, their silhouettes framed against the fading sun. He knew right away who they were. He stood still as they approached, dust swirling behind them. Their chief dismounted, the same man who had declared Naya belonged to Daniel months before. Naya stepped out of the cabin, her eyes wide but calm. The chief spoke first, his deep voice echoing. "White man, the spirits told us to return. We came to see if you honored the sacred bond." Daniel met his gaze evenly. "I didn't claim her for myself. She's free to choose her own life." The chief looked at Naya. "And what does she choose?" For a long moment, Naya said nothing. The wind whispered through the sagebrush. Then she walked forward, her bare feet brushing the dust, her voice soft but strong. "When the river took me, I thought my life ended. But he pulled me back, not as a master, not as a savior, as a man with a kind heart." She turned toward Daniel. "I was bound to him by your law. Now I stay by my own." The warriors exchanged glances, murmuring in their language. The chief's expression softened, pride glinting in his eyes. Then the law has been fulfilled, not by chains, but by choice. He placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. You did not take her as property. That makes you worthy of her spirit. Daniel nodded, emotion tightening his throat. All I ever wanted was for her to be free. The chief smiled faintly. Freedom and love are one when both hearts agree. With that, the tribe turned their horses and rode away, leaving a trail of red dust under the golden light. As the last rider disappeared beyond the hills, Naya exhaled slowly, tears shimmering in her eyes. They will not come again, she said softly. Daniel looked at her, his voice low. Guess it's just you and me now. She smiled, small, genuine, and full of peace. It was always you and me, Daniel Reeves. That evening, under the burning hues of the western sunset, they stood side by side outside the cabin. The same river that had nearly taken her life now glowed in shades of gold, calm and eternal. Daniel reached for her hand. Maybe the spirits were right after all, he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. No, she whispered, it was the river that chose. The wind carried their laughter into the open land, a cowboy and an Apache woman, once strangers, now bound by something stronger than law, deeper than fate, a love written by the river itself.